Hello, it's Wednesday, 16th of February 2022. Today I am going to be talking about one of my very favourite albums of all time, Underworld's 1996 classic, Second Toughest in the Infants. But first, I need to thank Gary for telling me that I mispronounced the name of one of the Cinerama songs in the episode I talked about yesterday. I understand that this is actually pronounced Lolo Brigida, and Lolo Brigida was a Italian film actress, apparently winner of the award, the most beautiful woman in the world, and was in some spy movies in the 60s. It's important to get these things right, or at least as right as we can get them. And so, therefore, I suspect that photo is a photo of Lolo Brigida herself. Great song, great band. In case you haven't seen any of the other ones, I love Cinerama and The Wedding Present. But today, it's all about Underworld. And we start talking about Underworld, with a record I've been waiting to get in the post for quite some time. And I wanted to share it with you because I didn't know this thing existed until last week. It is an American 12-inch of Cowgirl and Rez. Very possibly the most life-changing A and B sides to any record which I've ever come across. This is unlike other ones because this is an American-only white vinyl version of it. Of course, it don't mean a thing if the songs aren't fantastic, but the songs absolutely are. And I saw this, and frankly, my record collector geek side went, I'm going to have to buy it on white vinyl, because I'm a sucker for coloured vinyl, which means I'm almost definitely going to be taking out a second mortgage for Record Store Day today, this year, because pretty much everything is a limited edition on coloured vinyl in that. 1995 was a busy year for the band, but not necessarily particularly publicly. They didn't play a huge amount of live shows. There aren't a huge amount of live recordings of the live shows actually either. I think there's a festival appearance from Norway, I think, and a show in Leicester, which was recorded at the Leicester de Montfort University Student Hall, my university. Well, aside from that, 1995 was mostly spent doing remixes, releasing one single, and recording an album. The first one of the remixes which came out was this, remixes of the Chemical Brothers' Leave Home, the Underworld mixes. And the way that Underworld approached their remixes, as I've mentioned in a previous episode, was largely taking slices or fragments of the original track and then building their own banging techno anthem around it. These Underworld mixes are phenomenally good, so good that they used to get club floor play in their own right. In the days when I used to go to nightclubs, very long time ago now, last century, last millennia in fact, and this one always put the shy indie boys and made them dance, including, of course, myself. The band also played Leave Home a number of times live in 1995. Because they had all of it in their live setup. So the Chemical Brothers remixes of Leave Home by Underworld, if you get a chance, these are brilliant. Give them a listen and you'll hear two fantastic instrumental Underworld tracks from 1995 that may have eluded you. But the real thing that happened in 1995 makes it sound like the rest of the year was fake. It definitely wasn't. The main thing that happened in 1995 was the release of perhaps a single that you may or may not have heard of, a little known small selling record. It sold 1,400 copies on release. I think it got to about number 55 in the charts. It's called Born Slippy. If you know Underworld, you will have heard of this song. If you haven't, you've definitely heard the song at some point. It's the Lager 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 Mega Mega White Thing song. And this is a song that I think really changed the band's fortunes. The film director, Danny Boyle, was a fan of Underworld, listened to Dub No Bass with My Head Man, and he put, I think, Born Slippy and a track called Dark Train as a temp music track in his film Trainspotting. I'm sure you've heard of that. The orange is actually completely coincidental. I hadn't realised until I just slipped up that they're both the same shade of orange. But Born Slippy was released as a 2-track 12-inch, a second remix 12-inch, and a 3-track CD single. And the 3-track CD single is over there, and if I was to go and pick it up, I would have to interrupt the programme, so I've chosen not to do that for this. But no, Born Slippy is a fantastic track. It's really strange actually for me, because in my mind Born Slippy only really exists as part of the 3-track CD single, and the Born Slippy Knucks, the version that everybody knows and that they play at every show, is actually a B-side. It's the B-side of this 12-inch. It's the second track on the CD single, and to me it feels a bit incomplete, actually, just opening with those big chords from heaven which open Born Slippy, because the track before it, Born Slippy itself, is a rampaging and fantastic 8.5-minute instrumental. The way that Underworld would build songs at this point, it's also the way that they would play them live, would effectively is that they would have a series of layers of loops and sequences that were coming out of a hard drive, and effectively when they played live and also when they recorded, they would jam through those sequences, and eventually they would reach a structure that they would feel would be the best structure for the song. So an Underworld song isn't necessarily anything like written in a conventional format. It's built out of little tiny parts, and then all those parts are kind of created together to create a montage of sound that rotates through various elements. The A side of this is one of the best techno instrumentals I've ever heard. You know, you listen to the Leave Home remixes of the Chemical Brothers track, and it follows a very similar template to Born Slippy, which is that it starts, it builds, it adds in sequences, it adds in elements as it goes along, it adds in arpeggios and other elements, and then it kind of throws in until suddenly it kind of just explodes, and it kind of almost just climaxes and dissipates into a nothingness. And one of the things that you'll know from, if you go to, or if you went to clubs at the time, or if I want to sound like, how do you do, fellow kids, if you went to discotheques in the 90s, but if you went to those things, one of the things that was really important was that, you know, the sense of pull, push, tension, release that came out of it is the way that you would build up to, and then you'd feel the bass. You know, that thing is just that moment where that rush happens and when everything drops out, and then you suddenly know it's going to kick in and it's all going to kick off. And of course, there's almost definitely going to be lasers. That's how the instrumental Born Slippy often worked. The instrumental Born Slippy on the A side is a fantastic track. Terrible single because no chorus, no lyrics, nothing, but it's a dance floor banger, the equivalent of something like Res, for example. And so here we have the original JBO 12-inch here from 1995, one of the 1400 that was sold, with a picture of a tractor on it, and on the B side, Knucks. Now, Knucks is actually the track which you know. It's the one which is the big hit that's in Trainspotting, the instrumental. The band did play live many times, although they have dropped it. And beginning around about 1999, the band will play a very shortened version of the original Born Slippy as a feed-in to Knucks itself. So you build that sense of climax. So the short version of Born Slippy, the original instrumental that the band play live now, is maybe 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, and it basically goes straight from the intro of Born Slippy into Knucks itself. Now, in my mind, as I've said before, Knucks is a B-side. It's not a hit single. To me, it's a failed single. It's a fantastic B-side. It's up there with, you know, Suede's The Living Dead, or the Smiths' How Soon Is Now, or the Manic Street Preachers' Prologue to History. It's a phenomenal B-side, and somehow it's become a hit. But I'm not going to be a snob about it at all. It's just this song existed to me as not a hit before. So the idea of it being a hit is to me, when they play it live, and I've seen the last Underworld gig to date, which was in December 2019 at the Wembley Arena. When they play Born Slippy, I'm like, how come everyone knows this? And then I remember that the song was a huge bloody hit. And I can't pretend that I'm not overjoyed about that, because Born Slippy being a hit gave the band a degree of financial independence and success that they deserved. And I'm very pleased about it. So Born Slippy, the A side and the B side. The third track on the CD single is also on the remix 12-inch here. Now the other one had what looks to be some kind of lawnmower, and this is clearly a fantastic picture of a tractor. This sold less than the other copy. There's maybe only a few hundred of these going around because Underworld weren't that big a band at the time. But Born Slippy, this is a version of the track called Telematic, which is effectively like a super extended coda to Born Slippy. So you can kind of think about Born Slippy as the original being kind of like the build up. Born Slippy itself being, the action scene, and then Telematic being kind of like an electronic coda to it. But it existed as a second 12-inch. And the B side of this was the Winger mix of Cowgirl, which hadn't been released in the UK because the Winger mix of Cowgirl was only on the TVT US single of Cowgirl. Which wasn't released in the UK. So, in order to avoid people buying that 12-inch in order to get the Winger mix, they stuck it on the B side of Born Slippy Telematic here, although the CD single had 3 tracks on it and it ran to something like half an hour. The BPI, British Phonogram Industry, had chart rules that said that you couldn't have more than, I think, 4 tracks. It couldn't run more than 20 or 30 minutes. And this was to stop acts like the Shaman doing 2 or 3 or 4 CD singles with 8 or 9 or 10 remixes of the same track on them, and then eventually putting out something like 40 mixes of a song. I think Boss Drum had something like 12 remixes. Enjoy the Silence by Depeche Mode came on 3 different 12-inches, and there's something like 16 official remixes of that song. Not all of them are any good, but it was designed to stop the bands releasing a new 12-inch every week to keep the song in the charts, knowing that the fans would buy it and effectively game the system. These days, in order to game the system, they release a different colour vinyl with each different indie store and retailer, and they do signed versions and deluxe versions and things like that, and it gets a very high chart placing and then it disappears. It's just the same thing, but it's working at an album scale instead of a single scale. So Born Slippy, fantastic track. You know that. Otherwise, why would you be watching a video about Underworld? Well, I mean, I don't know. Put it on. It is, put technically, a banger. I think it's fair to say. And then the band went back into the studio. They played some shows, and then they road tested some new tracks, and then they started recording the album Second Toughest in the Anthems. And of course, as I've mentioned before, I can't remember where I've stuck the album here. So, yeah, Second Toughest in the Anthems was released in March 1996. The height of Britpop. Oasis were surfing the waves. Blur were announcing headlining festivals. Suede were just on the verge of coming back. Pulp were an arena band. And Trainspotting had just come out. So Trainspotting was released, I think, February 1996, maybe March 1996. And the song Born Slippy in the soundtrack to the film Trainspotting was getting an awful lot of traction at this point. So second-hand copies of Born Slippy were becoming quite expensive. I probably should have sold mine, actually, made a load of money. And the soundtrack album for Trainspotting shifted millions of copies, in no small part due to the fact that Born Slippy was on it. And that was the only place that you could get it for a period of time, because the CD single was deleted. And so Trainspotting as a film is it's one of those films that just captures the zeitgeist, really. And I hate the word zeitgeist, but I remember watching it in a cinema in Cardiff in February 1996 and go, no one's making films like this. Not even Quentin Tarantino is making films like this. Because films that people like Quentin Tarantino were making, and then follow-ups like Killing Zoe and things like that, they were all American. They're all there wasn't much in the way of an understanding of what it was like to be British and to live in a British city. So when somebody made a film with a similar kind of mindset that was set in the UK, certainly for me, when I watch The Matrix, I'm not watching it and thinking, wow, man, that's so realistic. Looking at the architecture in films like The Matrix or The Mission Impossibles or anything by Michael Bay, I'm very aware it's happening in a reality that doesn't exist for me, because it's happening in Chicago or in Toronto or in Sydney, and the architecture is different. And the architecture differs in every country near enough. You go to Belgium and you go to the Netherlands, and you can see, even if it's a slight architectural difference, you can tell which country you're in by looking at the building. I can tell the difference between homes in Sweden and in Stockholm, from homes that are in Holland. And I just look at them and go, they're different. I don't know how, I know, but they're different. And then again, somewhere in Sheffield, you can look at it and you can even identify the architecture down to the town sometimes. You can go, that's Sheffield, without even knowing where it is. And so when you watch an American film, if you're in the UK or if you're in Europe and you're watching it and you're going, that's not the world I live in, maybe The Matrix wouldn't have been so successful if The Matrix just looked like Amsterdam at night. I have no idea. But it's a thing where you kind of go, this was the first time I saw a film that really talked about at least the world which I saw and the way in which I saw it. So, for example, the opening scene, which is a pan down Edinburgh High Street. By the way, it's geographically wrong. So when filmmakers make movies and they don't follow the maps, and you kind of go, there's no way you can get from there to there. It's like when I was watching a Sherlock Holmes film with Robert Downey Jr. and I go, mate, the easiest way to get from Euston to Victoria is not via Monument. That's like 3 miles that way. But of course, if you don't know London, who gives a shit? Apart from me, when I sit there, go, that's not how maps work. Are you teleporting? Of course, if I started speaking like that to the screen in the cinema, they'd be like, "Sir, you have to leave." So now, 10 years later, I'm now talking to my mobile phone about it. Anyway, Trainspotting, fantastic movie. A film about poverty, desperation, a lack of career opportunities from doors that never knock, a lack of a future that's really laid out for you, and so therefore you kind of you live for today because tomorrow is going to be pretty fucking crappy, and that's the world that Trainspotting was set into, and the song Born Slippy became a very important song in the context of the film because it kind of led into the end credits and to Mark Renton's betrayal of his friends, which ultimately led to personally his redemption, and he was able to start another life somewhere else. Although, of course, in Trainspotting 2 and the follow-up book, which Irvine Welsh wrote, turned out to be very, very different indeed, but were thematically correct. No, so Trainspotting was a film that to me it's kind of like the most Britpoppy of films, in so much as there was a period of time when Britain seemed to be the country where shit was happening, where stuff was going down in a really good sense of the word. And Trainspotting is the film around which that kind of revolved in Britpop, and to another extent bands like Underworld, Chemical Brothers, Left Field, Orbital, the kind of the almost the semi kind of rave scene. Those were things where people were kind of clinging to it and going. There were two kind of scenes that operated at almost the same time, but were at the opposite ends of it. And I was, just as happy going down to one of the rave clubs wearing, well, not an Oasis t-shirt because I didn't have any Oasis t-shirts and I wasn't a huge Oasis fan. But wearing a suede t-shirt, and I go, fine with me, all the same thing. And then the next month out came the second album, Second Toughest in the Infants by Underworld, and this is a masterpiece. It really, really is fantastic LP. It's double album, although really it's not regarded as a double album because it all fit on one CD, and we were living in the age of CD bloat. So vinyl copies there weren't that many vinyl copies of this which came out. I picked this up maybe 10 years ago or something, for maybe 10 or 15 pounds, because people were like, vinyl's never going to come back. But there you are. Now the album, Second Toughest in the Infants, takes its title from one of the band's children. They said, well, how are you getting on at school? And the response was, I'm second toughest in the infants. And somebody somewhere wrote that down and went, nice, we'll have that. That'll make a good LP title. And they're absolutely right. It comes on 4 sides of vinyl and 1 CD. And it's just an absolute belter. It really, really is. So what you've got here is you've got side 1 opens with a 3-song kind of medley, which is actually 1 song, which is about 16-17 minutes long, which is Juanita, Kiteless, and To Dream of Love, which I've seen the band play live, both back then and relatively recently. I think it's an absolute banger. I think the best way to describe a lot of their songs is that they were kind of like, you build songs and then you build bridges between the songs, and you end up creating what feels like it's 1 song that just happens to be divided into multiple parts. So Juanita, Kiteless, and To Dream of Love it starts slow, it builds, and then it just kind of grows and grows and grows, and then there's suddenly a section when everything drops out, the vocals come back in, and then the whole thing kicks off again. It's incredible live. I saw Underworld several times in the 90s. I was very, very lucky to see those shows. The Everything DVD. If I hadn't been at some of the shows that were on the Everything DVD, I would have been like, I really wish I'd been to those shows. Why didn't I go to those shows? But I can actually say, yeah, I went to those shows. So I know I was, there was sometimes a lot of the gigs I've been to, the only room in the universe I wanted to be in at that particular point, apart from possibly Drew Barrymore's bedroom, was where that gig was happening, and I was in that room. So as far as I was concerned, I was living the dream. I was living a realization of my childhood ambitions, because when I was a child and an adult, listening to film soundtracks, listening to pop music, and I was listening to the records going, I want to be in the room when the band played that song. and I was able to be in the room when that band played that song, and I was like, I'm getting to live my childhood ambitions. Seeing a band that I love is kind of like someone going, you can be an extra in Star Wars, because I'm part of that story. I'm reminded of something that a now disgraced singer said, which is, I don't go on tour. They don't come to see me, I come to see them. And when he's talking about the audience, I thought that's quite an astute way of looking at it, really. So we've got the second track on the album, though actually technically it's the fourth, is Band Style and Sappy's Curry. That's a 9-minute song, which is pretty long, and it goes through a number of various styles. And again, like Juanita, Kiteless, and To Dream of Love, it kind of changes and evolves from one type of song into another song. And the change is so slow. It's not like watching paint drop, but it's kind of like watching some of that pixel art that there was in the 2000s, when you'd see one pixel change and eventually the whole thing would kind of morph slowly. But it happens so slowly, you don't necessarily see how it happens. And you kind of, what you do is you're hearing sound transform into something else, in the way that when you listen to an individual slice of a guitar or something, it's just a guitar, but you put that with a vocal, and then all of a sudden you've got a chorus, and then you add some rhythms in there, and then all of a sudden you've got, a hit. Like, for example, when somebody listened to, I think, the instrumental version of Happy Monday, Step On, and they went, I don't need to hear the rest of the song, the rhythm track is enough to tell me that's going to be a hit. Of course, they're absolutely right. Track 3 is Confusion, the Waitress, a song that the band had been playing live for a long period of time. So it had been played, I think, for a couple of years before the album came out, alongside another track called Roller, which we get to later on. And Confusion, the Waitress, is it's a great song, actually. It's as I said before, Underworld songs they don't necessarily sound like songs made from people. It sounds like songs that are made of fractured transmissions back from reality. So it's almost like, and Carl Hyde talked about this when he was talking about writing his lyrics, is that he was an alcoholic until probably late 1996 or thereabouts, maybe 1995. And the story around Born Slippy, that inspired Born Slippy, is also something that kind of appeared a little bit in Dirty Epic and some of these other songs. They're kind of like dispatches from the front line of human despair, of when human beings are out and they're drunk and they're having a really great time. And he's kind of scribbling down and remembering things that people are saying and images that he's seeing and things. And he's kind of putting them all together to create a collage of human life in all its infinite variety, life's rich pageant indeed, and kind of putting that together as lyrics. So you've got these kind of like huge Philip Glass style songs, which are built from lots and lots of repetitive but changing, evolving musical motifs and ideas. It's basically like, prog techno. Sorry guys, it is. But I'm going to admit that. So we've got like basically prog techno, and then you've got these fractured lyrics which somehow make some kind of form of sense. Where you're looking at it, it's like looking at the world through a bottom of a glass, and understanding, what it's like to be out on a Friday night, to get the last tube home and get the midnight train back to Romford, and that's where the lyrics of things like Confusion, the Waitress come for, and that's kind of backed up in the sleeve art that we've got here. It's not really anything. You look at it and you go, well, what is it? And it's it's an abstract representation of a form of life. It really is, and that's where this comes from. This isn't meaningless. It just has a meaning that is not immediately apparent. It's not a picture of four millionaires standing next to a wall with an album named after the band. They're wearing sunglasses, and one of them's probably got a matchstick in his mouth, looking hard and heavy, and they're going to play songs like Tonight, I'm Going to Rock You Tonight. It's not like that at all. It's something far more fragmented and more broken, I think, than that. So there we go, which means I do need to pick up now, and now is the right time to talk about it, is the lyrical inspiration for the track Born Slippy. Now, at the time that Trainspotting came out, Born Slippy was getting a lot of club play. It was getting a lot of what's the word I'm thinking of here? It was a hit that you couldn't buy. Obviously, these days people just stream it and then buy it, and they wouldn't have a choice about where it went in the charts. But the band had to make a conscious decision to re-release Born Slippy, which happened pretty quickly after the release of the album. But the lyric to Born Slippy was inspired by an event that happened in early 1995 when Carl Hyde was in London. I think he was in a pub called The Ship on Wardour Street, and he came out of the toilets and he gave a man £10 to buy a drink and then walked off. Now, the man that he gave the drink to was Bill Bailey, a comedian who you may or may not have heard of. And if you know Bill Bailey, you can imagine the look on his face when he's not being given £10 to buy a drink by a random stranger. Now add that to the look that Bill Bailey's face is going to have on it anyway, and then all of a sudden, Carl Hyde was saying he was watching television years later. He saw Bill Bailey and went, that's the guy I gave the money to that looked to me confused, that inspired Born Slippy. So without Bill Bailey, we wouldn't have Born Slippy. And I think Born Slippy also, the lyric about it is, going, on the last train back to Romford, mega white thing. And it's about like this huge collage of bizarre broken moments, fragments of when you're drunk, and if you're in London or somewhere else, and you think, okay, the night's over, I've got to go home, I've got to get on a tube, I've got to make sure I don't fall asleep on the tube, I've got to make sure I get the train, I've got to make sure I don't wake up where the train terminates at 2 o'clock in the morning at Ramsgate. I have to get up before that when I actually get home. And all of my friends who live in my town, apart from me, have fallen asleep on the train, woken up in Ramsgate and had to get a cab home, which cost about £150, because I am now boring and sensible. That will not happen to me. But I have had some pretty hairy trips on night buses home when I was drinking much more in the 90s, where I'm like, I'm not sure I'm going to make it all the way home without being sick. And it's a terrible situation to be in. And Born Slippy is around kind of doing that white knuckle ride on the tubes and making sure that you get the last train home, and then sitting on the train going, I hope to God I don't fall asleep whilst the world sleeps beside you and you're frankly fucked off your box and you're starting to come down. That's what Born Slippy is about, and that's actually where this fits in rightly with the Trainspotting kind of film, because the film itself it's not about, and it never has been, and anybody who thinks it has grossly misread the film. It's not glamorising drug use, it's a warning against it. Saying, well, look, you take drugs, this is what happens. Bad things happen to you, there are consequences. What goes up definitely comes down, and the further you go up, the further you come down. And speaking from personal experience, I can attest that is definitely the case. So we have, in the midst of all this, Second Toughest in the Infants, and the band are touring their way through it as we speak. I should have seen them at the Q Club in Birmingham. However, I was at another gig. I think I was seeing Oasis that night. In retrospect, I made the wrong choice, but I caught up and saw Underworld many more times over the remaining years, and I don't regret anything about it. But the Q Club in Birmingham, for those of you who don't know, was a church. And so the bands would play in a converted church hall. There was a huge organ at the back. It was designed as like a congregation church, could hold maybe 1,400 people. I saw a lot of bands there. I didn't get to see David Bowie there because David Bowie sold out before I could get a ticket. But then again, in 1997, David Bowie playing to 1,400 people, of course that was going to sell out pretty quickly, let alone later on. Of course, now, if he was alive, he could sell out stadiums in the drop of a hat. But that wasn't necessarily where the world was in 1997. So Second Toughest in the Infants is followed up. We were on Confusion, the Waitress. Sorry guys, I'm kind of leaping all over the place here. And it's followed up by a track called Roller. Now Roller is a brilliant instrumental. It's kind of like this heavy, beepy, squelchy bass track that is basically a total banger, and very instrumental. Roller was released as a promotional 12-inch. There were 75 copies of it. It had an alternate extended mix of Roller on it. I have it here. This is one of the 12 inches, and it was a white label. And on the A side, you had an extended version of Roller, and on the B side you had a track called Deep Pan, which was an instrumental remix of Born Slippy that they later added the vocals to, and it became the Deep Pan mix of Born Slippy. But at this point it wasn't anything, it was just a track called Deep Pan. And that's the way Underworld did their remixes. They created new songs and then they turned them into remixes as it went. The promotional blur that goes with the Roller 12-inch, by the way, calls it Roller as opposed to Roller. Now the reason it's called Roller, by the way, is because there is a street in Romford called Crow Lane, and if you take the ROW from Crow and the LA from Lane, it becomes Roller. And Crow Lane isn't too far away from Kine Road, which is where the band's studio was based at the time. The band now operates out of a pig shed in the countryside near Romford, the location of which is officially undeclared. So there you go. And Roller there, an exclusive vinyl-only promotional mix of the track. It is, by the way, available on YouTube as a vinyl rip, but the extended version of Roller has not been made available anywhere else. Now we follow up Roller with Pearl's Girl. And Pearl's Girl was the first single that was released from the album. And I'm going to address, I think, Pearl's Girl now, because the remaining 3 songs on the album are Air Towel, Blue Ski, and Stagger. And Stagger is probably the best place to end the album, because it feels, it's got that kind of sense like, I don't know if you remember the video games where you could play where you drank, actually, like Grand Theft Auto, and the more you drank, the harder it got to control things, and everything became very woozy, and gravity became a little bit wibbly wobbly and timey-wimey. Stagger really feels like that. It's literally an audio depiction of staggering home when you're completely shit-faced and you can't make sense of anything. So really, Second Toughest in the Infants is an album around being an alcoholic, alcoholism. It's about pleasure and hedonism, and it's around the fact that out goes up, must come down. It's all there in the LP in a kind of very broken, fractured form that also represents itself in the lyrics to songs like Born Slippy. It's one of those things where if you're an alcoholic, there comes a point when you realise you're either going to love the thing that kills you, or you have to stop. I think Carl Hyde got to that point where, as well, I've gone too far now, or more correctly, I've almost gone too far to come back. And when you've gone, sometimes you only know you've gone too far when you can't go back to where you were. And sometimes, you're able to go, I'm right at the edge of how far I can go before I can turn back or I can come back. And he came back. Not everybody does. What the world needs really is, definitely the world definitely doesn't need any more dead musicians. It's got too many of them as it is, and not enough people. I'd love to see people like Amy Winehouse, Kurt Cobain. I'd love to see Jeff Buckley alive now making music. I mean, what a fantastic experience that would be. I feel like you've only just scratched the surface of what you've been able to achieve. And I'd love them to have lived, but they didn't. First single released from the album at around about the same time was Pearl's Girl. Here is a UK 12-inch of Pearl's Girl, which is backed with a track called Cherry Pie. Cherry Pie is an alternate version of Roller. So you can actually run a medley of Cherry Pie and Roller into each other, and they do work. They work like extensions of it, and a version of it has been released that contained those two. There was a couple of CD singles. So Pearl's Girl came on 2 CD singles. This one here, backed with an edit of Pearl's Girl, a short version, Oik Oik, and Cherry Pie. Oik Oik, by the way, is also a track which the band have played live. All these B-sides, phenomenal tracks. They were just putting out more songs, or they were recording more songs than they had time to release. As you'll find out when we come to the expanded versions of the albums. And then we have this, which is Pearl's Girl Carp Dreams, which is an extended alternate version of the track that runs a couple of minutes longer, but is very, very different. A track called Mosaic and a track called Deep Arch as well. And then, obviously, we have the Second Toughest in the Infants album here. Germany got a special 12-inch of Pearl's Girl. This is a pretty beaten up copy, I'm afraid to say. It's been nibbled by beasties. This contains all the tracks off the CD singles on 3 12-inches. And it's absolutely gorgeous. It's also, I'm afraid to say, hard to get in good condition these days. Almost every copy of it is, putting it technically, beaten up to shit, because these were records that were bought and loved. No one was thinking, well, what state is this record going to be in 26 years' time? They were like, I want to listen to this now. I love it now. And that's the world that we lived in. But there's a triple 12-inch of Pearl's Girl that was released in Germany that has a load of tracks on it. All the tracks, one track on each side from the respective kind of 6-track CD singles there. And this is hard to get, I'm afraid to say. That's not a flex. It just is. I wish it wasn't, because I think it's far better. I do wish that these things would get repressed. I'd buy new ones and pay new ones, but they weren't. Pearl's Girl didn't chart particularly well, maybe 43, 42, something like that. Underworld had a built-in fan base, but they hadn't crossed over. And the thing they needed to cross over was the big hit, the song that everybody remembered. That song, of course, was the B-side, and it was on Trainspotting. It was Born Slippy. It was the song that launched probably dozens of romances, changed thousands of lives, and is a classic known to this day. So the band, the band were like, oh God, re-releasing a track It's a bit corny, isn't it, re-releasing a song? I don't know if we want to do it. And the answer was yes, you do want to do it. You do want to re-release it. They sent out like a what's the word now? They sent out an opinion sheet of some remixes of Born Slippy to DJs, and they sent it out to 100 DJs, and of the 100 DJs, 99 said re-release this. It is a banger. Everyone needs it right now. And one person said, don't re-release it. And Underworld basically had to be talked into re-releasing the track, which was good because copies of Born Slippy were difficult to get. I already had one, but they were difficult to get at this point. And so Born Slippy got a remix and a reissue as 2 CD singles. This one here is backed with Dark Train, which is also from the Trainspotting soundtrack, and a remix of Band Style by Alex Reese. And a second CD single that was 4 remixes of Born Slippy Knucks. It has the long version of Knucks, which runs 11 minutes 34, which is longer than any version that had been released previously. It's got a deep pan remix, which you may have seen in a slightly different form on the Roller 12-inch, and remixes by the band's DJ and later live technician and performer Darren Price on the second CD. In Germany, the CD of Born Slippy was released as a double pack in this, and there were some 12-inches. I didn't feel the need to buy them because they were all remixes by basically third parties, because the band were touring constantly and they weren't taking a break and they weren't taking a rest. So Second Toughest in the Infants kind of got a reissue, this time with a bonus disc. The bonus disc included the ever classic track Res there, and it also included Born Slippy. So effectively a double CD version was released in some territories of Born Slippy, of Second Toughest with Born Slippy and Res on it, to really kind of like stip people over to go, yeah, I'm going to go and buy this. It's got the Lager Lager song on, which was a very good idea. And Pearl's Girl got a re-release as well, but this time the re-release of Pearl's Girl came with all new tracks on it. So it was a remix called Tin There of Pearl's Girl, which takes basically some of the underlying key portions of the track and turns it into a huge 10-minute epic build track, much like the original Born Slippy A side. It's a banger, and the band used to play Tin There live, and it tell you what, ripped my goddamn face off when I saw them play Tin There live. They got a CD release, and it also got a 12-inch release here, which has got the LP mix of Pearl's Girl on, and it's also got the Tin There remix. If you don't know the Tin There remix of Born Slippy, it is of Pearl's Girl, it's fantastic, totally, genuinely, face-meltingly beautiful. But it really only makes sense in a dark room with a low ceiling and a high BPM, and possibly some tinnitus as well, which is good because I have tinnitus, so it makes it sound even better. Now that sounds very, very flippant. It isn't. The Pearl's Girl remix is the Tin There mix is absolutely great. I adore it, and it's one of my favourite Underworld tracks. In America, Pearl's Girl got a release as a separate kind of album-length CD EP, which featured a previously unreleased version of Pearl's Girl, which had been on a Melody Maker cassette, which I've forgotten to get out there, called the 14996 mix, and then the B-sides: Puppies, Oik Oik, Cherry Pie, Mosaic, Deep Arch, and the Tin There mix of Pearl's Girl, and the edit and the album version. It didn't have Carp Dreams Koi on, I'm afraid, which is a shame, because then it would be this version of Pearl's Girl would be just as essential as the Dark and Long EP, but otherwise really great B-sides collection there from the period. The band also thought about maybe releasing a third single from the album, Juanita. This is the promotional CD single with an edit of Juanita on it. The first 4 minutes of the track, heavily truncated, and also the LP mix later on. So there's the shortcut mix of it, which runs at 3 minutes 50 seconds, is on this promotional CD. It's just an edit of the album version, but it didn't get traction. It was only released as a promo. They never kind of followed through to release it as a track in its own right, apart from in America, where TVT released a 12-inch of, oh no, it was on Wax Trax actually, the fantastic Wax Trax label. which released Roller as an A-side. This is the LP mix of Roller, it's not the extended version of Roller. And on the B-side is the LP mix of Juanita as well. So this is an American-only 12-inch that was pretty basic, actually. It's still in its shrink wrap, because I have another copy. I bought 2 copies by mistake. I can't remember all the songs which I've got. At this point, the band were still touring, still playing live, and the first, and to date only, Underworld bootleg live album was released. This is called European Club Click. This is one of the best live albums I have ever heard by anybody ever. Better than James Brown, better than Live After Death. It's phenomenal how good this is. This is a show from Cologne's Move Club on the 14th of July 1996. It's a full 2.5-hour live show. And of course they can't work out what the songs are called, so they just up the slightly weird artwork, and I have inserted my own track list in my own very lovely handwriting here. So it's a 2.5-hour kind of live set, in Cologne, and it's just one of the best live albums ever. This recording is on YouTube. You can listen to it there and you can go, oh my god, what an amazing live proposition Underworld were at this point. And in fact, one of my very, very favourite live recordings of all time is Live Underworld in 1996. But my very favourite Underworld live track is on this, which was released during the pandemic in 2021, I believe. I'm wearing the t-shirt that goes with it, a limited edition 12-inch featuring a demo version of Cowgirl, but on side AA, Rez and Cowgirl recorded live at the Reading Festival. This is 16 minutes of like face-meltingly banging stuff. It is the definitive arrangement of Rez and Cowgirl. It opens slowly with a kind of like a long extended intro of the main riff from Rez, but played much slower, that slowly speeds up to the point where it suddenly becomes an unstoppable juggernaut, and then it ends in much the same way. So it's just one of the best live songs ever at this point. And I'm basically just have to say, just listen to the band, and if you don't like them, you don't like them, and that's great. But if you do like them, Rez Cowgirl live at Reading. This, by the way, is a 12-inch. This is a test pressing of Mona, which is from the next album, which I misfiled in the wrong place. Sorry about that. 2016 saw the release of Second Toughest in the Infants, the deluxe edition. And if you like Underworld and you're only going to get one version of the album, this is the one to get. It's got the remastered version of the album on one disc. It's got a number of live versions of Knucks on disc 4. It's got the extra tracks, mixes and remixes, including versions of Born Slippy, Cherry Pie, Oik Oik, Puppies, Mosaic, Deep Arch, Pearl's Girl, and the original version of Born Slippy on there. And then it's got an extra CD, CD 3, which is 10 previously unreleased versions, which has 2 versions of release tracks, being an alternate version of Confusion, The Waitress and Roller, and then a number of other songs as well. And it all comes in this lovely little book here. So you've got like a fold-out sleeve there, and you've got a CD, you've got a download option, and you've got a book that kind of shows you what things happened, and text that goes with it at that point. If you only have one, I have no idea if this book's upside down or not, actually. Well, that makes me feel like where is it? Somebody put a Jackson Pollock up upside down, and nobody noticed for ages until one of the visitors went, "I think you've got that wrong." In the same way that when people put the Union Jack and they put it upside down, they don't realise they put it upside down. And when you put the Union Jack upside down in maritime terms, that means that actually it's a distress call. And we need to come and save England from having flags pointed upside down. Anyway, Second Toughest in the Infants, 2016 version, remastered, expanded, 8 previously unreleased songs from the sessions, almost all of the B-sides and the alternate mixes, and lots of good stuff in there, as well as a remastered version of the album and several versions of Knucks, so you can hear the song evolve and change over time until the band got its finalised version of it. The first version of Born Slippy, Knucks, that was played live was at the Glasgow Tramway, I think, or the Tram Shed, in April 1994, which was broadcast on BBC Radio 1, which, if you're going to debut a new song, probably playing it live on your first major national radio appearances is probably, I think it's fair to say, quite brave, almost in fact fearless. And as we know, brave and stupid, there's a very thin line between the two of them, and you have to know which side you land on. Nonetheless, second toughest in the Infants is, in my opinion, a brilliant record. It's got a great meaning to me, and it became the soundtrack to many wonderful nights of my life, and also wonderful afternoons, wonderful mornings, wonderful commutes, full stop. And it worked out very well. I love this album, and hopefully you will be able to listen to it and you'll find the same things in it that I have. So thank you for listening to 45 minutes of me talking about Underworld. Next time I talk about Underworld will be the Buku Fish album, released in 1999. But the next one of these I'm going to do, I'm putting it 50-50 on being Metallica's Master of Puppets next. No, I'm not taking the piss. I like the loud metal and I like the banging techno or something. There's always been a dance element to my rock music. Or as the Caleb said it, there's always been a rock element to my dance music. Anyway, I'm babbling. I should stop now. Take care of yourselves. I'll post some links to live shows and remixes and things like that so you can listen to the band underneath in the comment section down there. Stay beautiful and see you soon. Bye.